Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to another edition of the South Campus Show. Got Arlo and a good friend, Father Doug Ebert, recently retired. Welcome, Doug.
Yeah, thank you.
And of course, Arlo with his appetite right here. Doug, what one thing I appreciate is we went to the same high school at the same time. St. Thomas Academy, then on the campus of the then St. Thomas College. What do you remember? One of your favorite memories? I'll say at the academy. What?
Well, I was a little bit different than a lot of kids there. It's always been a sort of an upper class school, but I lived in the neighborhood. I would walk to school every day, 3 blocks away. I may be the only person I know that always had lunch at home until I went to college. And one of the things I used to remember is I'd always bring somebody home for lunch. Sometimes 2 or 3 people, and we'd play cards for a little while and then go back to school.
And be late for Mr. Carlin's 5th hour.
Oh no, we would always
geometry class.
We'd get there in the nick of time. It was just 3 blocks.
You had it down, yeah. And what's interesting, Doug, is 10 years after I was ordained, I was at St. Mark's in the rectory in the same neighborhood and got to know that neighborhood well. But so after the academy, then you went to Regis, I know, in Denver.
Yep.
And now I heard at some point you were in a rock and roll band. Tell me about that.
Well, the Beatles came on the scene in the 60s, and I always liked music. I was musically inclined. Played guitar and started a band, so I'd go around in different bands and so forth. I wasn't that good, but none of us really were, And
But you had fun.
Oh yes, it was great fun. Go play in people's backyards until the cops came because we got too loud. It was
innocent fun.
Oh yeah.
But I heard once in a while you come out of retirement from your band days and perform. Is that right?
Well, I've done a lot of studio work and I write songs. Some of the stuff is even getting played today. I still get royalty checks once in a while,
really?
But I make more money as a priest, if that gives you any idea of how the royalties are going.
Minimal.
Yes.
That's good. But just no, I love it when people take a talent and they keep, and even to this day, dabbling with it. But so your rock and roll days, and then I know it was a summer job. You worked the trains.
Yes, during college, I got a job working for the Great Northern Railway. Worked in the dining cars, and the trains. They had trains from Chicago to Seattle, but the headquarters was in St. Paul. So we get on at St. Paul, go down to Chicago, layover, all the way across the upper part of the country to Seattle.
Beautiful.
And then back to St. Paul. The whole trip would take about 5 days. And then you get about 4 or 5 days off. But they had an airline strike in 1966 when I was working for them. I had a lot of energy. I was a kid, So I'd turn right around and go back out. So I was at the point where I was getting so much overtime. I remember my dad saw one of my paychecks and said he was in the wrong business.
Plus, you learned a life skill of cooking.
Yes, and cooking on a train. It's interesting. You also learn how to be organized because you don't have a lot of space.
Yeah.
Those kitchens are about 7 feet wide and 30 feet long. There's a lot going on in there when you're feeding 200 or 300 people sometimes.
That's a deal. And but just the experience of the rails and you your interest in the railroad maybe started there but continued.
I liked trains when I was a kid. My grandparents had a cabin on Lake Pepin on the Wisconsin side, right near the railroad tracks, so I was always watching the trains go by when I wasn't playing in the water or water skiing. So it was a good job. It was hard work, but I liked it. I kept going back during the summers. And after I graduated, I knew that it was just a matter of time before I would be going into the military because I was going to get drafted. So I worked on the railroad right up until the time I went into the military.
Okay. And what branch of the service did you go into?
I got a telegram They didn't have cell phones and stuff. Got a telegram on one of the trips. That was from my parents, and they said, "We have something here from the draft board." So I said, "Don't open it. When I get back to St. Paul, I'm going to go on to an airplane and head down to Denver and enlist in the Air Force and try to get into pilot training." And it worked out.
It did.
It did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That could have changed it, because once you were in the Air Force, you got pilot training.
Yes.
Um,
Well, I also flew before I went into the Air Force.
Okay.
While I was in college, I used a lot of the money I made from the railroad, and my parents obviously helped. They were very helpful.
yeah.
And learned how to fly. You couldn't get a degree in that sort of thing. My freshman year, my roommate was a crop duster. He lived in Williston, North Dakota.
Okay.
And he took me up for a ride, and I said, "This is pretty cool." And he told me he was going to be an airline pilot where they made all kinds of money, didn't work much, and lots of pretty girls and stuff. So I said, "Well, yeah, I could probably do
So he
that."
said that you're in.
So I learned how to fly, and by the time I graduated from college, I was a flight instructor
Okay.
and doing that on the side.
And then tell the folks from there, where did your interest in flying take you?
Well, of course, I flew in the Air Force. Went through pilot training. When you train in the Air Force, it didn't matter. I had several hundred hours teaching and so forth. None of that mattered to them. So as far as the Air Force was concerned, I was equal with all these other young men who'd never flown in their lives. So, when you're learning how to fly, there's lots of sensations and so forth. So my classmates, while they were still getting over that air sickness stage, I was having the time of my life. So for the first time in my life, I was near the top of the heap. I've never really been one who is always at the top of things. In high school, I think we share that.
We do.
Yeah. But because I had all this experience before, I did very well in
Who wants to be at the top of the heap? But when you end
when
up
you're
there,
at the
why
top
not?
of the heap, everybody watches the
So from there, you're instructing and you've got the experience, and then
Then I went into, but I finished pilot training in Laredo, Texas,
okay.
and then flew C-141s. And that was at Travis Air Force Base. And we were primarily taking supplies over to Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Japan.
Would that qualify you as a Vietnam vet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I flew a lot of missions there. They call them hospital ships, a lot of air evacuation missions. I flew over 100 of those, so you got an email, air medal for every 50.
Yeah.
So I have a couple air medals, but it's not the sort of heroic combat by any means.
Thanks for
But I was there.
serving, And then after the military.
Then I went to American Airlines in 1973 and got laid off almost immediately because that was our first energy crisis at the end of 73 during the Arab oil embargo. And that was going on when the
Gas prices went up.
Arab-Israeli conflict, and there were shortages and so forth. So I was laid off for a few years, and then I got more serious about playing rock and roll and waiting tables.
Okay.
I waited tables at the Lexington and St. Paul and the Blue Horse. Lexington's still there, Blue Horse isn't.
On University Avenue, I remember it. When'd you get rehired?
Well, I was laid off in 1974 and went back to work in 76. I was at that point, or at that time, you had 3 people in the cockpits of all the airplanes. You had a flight engineer, a co-pilot, and a captain. It was a seniority system, and American had a lot of 727s. So I was a flight engineer on 727s for quite a while. And then when deregulation occurred, I moved up very rapidly and became a captain in 1988.
Beautiful. Yeah. Until when?
1988 until I retired in 2003.
Okay. So, I'm told September 11th, 2001 came along, and that got your attention?
Oh yes, well I knew a lot of the people in management. I did a little bit of unofficial liaison work between the union and management. So I was in Milwaukee on a vacation, actually working on a railroad car renovation, so you'll have to go back to that, I guess. But it was surprising. You know, I turned on the TV, saw that building on fire, and they said a little airplane had run into it, and I thought, no, that's not a little airplane. Something's going on.
Yeah.
And because I have a trained eye looking for other airplanes and so forth, I saw something in that TV, live TV, that looked like another airplane coming. I figured it was probably a helicopter or something. And then all of a sudden, this huge explosion, and this airplane goes into the other building.
Yeah, the other tragic.
Yeah, it was. So I immediately got on the phone, and they at that time they said there were 3 airplanes of ours, American, that they didn't know where they were. Well, they found one of them, and then one went to the Pentagon, then the other one went to the World Trade Center.
You know, personal question. Do you ever think that could have been me flying one of those planes?
You know, you think about that stuff whenever there's an accident or something dramatic, but it just not. I didn't really think of it in that point. Although I knew some of the people involved. And that one, the airplane that went to the World Trade Center, I had flown a few months earlier. That same airplane. I remember the airplane. We flew it into Sweden, and I remember there was some issues with it. Nothing serious, but that's why I happen to remember that airplane.
Yeah. So tell me, Doug, you know, you go from rock and roll band to working the rails as a chef and college, and then Air Force, and then flying with American Airlines for 30 years, commercial airlines. How'd priesthood come into the picture?
Well, I fought the priesthood when I was a little kid. You know, I would play mass. Did you do that when you were little?
Of course.
Of course.
We all
Yeah.
did.
How was it? Was it better than now?
Was it valid? I think it was valid. The robes, the sheet.
You know, I was almost went to the seminary from St. Thomas, and I didn't. And then when I was at Regis, I became interested in the Jesuits and then applied and was almost on my way to St. Bonifacius. I think their division was out here. I got cold feet and didn't go then. It was probably a good thing. You know, I was kind of a rigid, scrupulous kind of guy, you know, very much by the rules and able to do it better then probably than I can now, you know. So I wound up having a little bit of trouble with my faith for a while, but never stopped praying. You know, never had any trouble with my faith in God, but in actual practicing my Catholicism, there was some lapse there. And I was very busy, you know, during my airline career. That's the reason I never got married, is probably because I was too busy, you know. I was interested in music, rebuilt railroad cars on the side, flew airplanes. That's what you do when you have a lot of time off and a good income.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. But you felt this tug.
Oh, the tug never stopped.
Okay.
The tug never stopped, even when I wasn't actively practicing, which was interesting. You know?
Yeah.
So I remember when I became active again, it was about the same time I became a captain. You know, reconciled and came back and started going to Mass more and more. And by the mid-90s, I decided if an early retirement offer came, I would take it and try to apply it to the seminary.
Wow. So just, you know, everyone has their own story when it comes to their faith journey. And
some are a little long, aren't they?
Well, yours, it seems circuitous, but...
well, I didn't go to seminary until I was 57, so I had a lot of time to...
you did. And I went at 18, and you almost went in at 18, but seriously, so the little lapse, you're trying to figure it out. And I said in a homily this last weekend, people that are no longer going to church, sometimes, not always, we don't know, it's not that they lost their faith, they're trying to find their faith.
Yeah.
And, you know, it seems, so with you and you, but
Well, that's one of the
hunger.
things that
Yeah.
motivated me, to get people to come back since I had done that.
Yeah.
And found
Yeah.
fulfillment,
Yeah.
to try, and especially with the young, I could see this going on as I'm traveling the world and so forth. You could see some of the decay in religious values and so forth, and kind of things that we were normal when we were growing up, like
Yeah.
going to church on Sunday, and hoping that I can
Yeah.
encourage people to come back.
Beautiful.
Without faith, there's not much to live for.
Right, right, and we're really excited about the implementation of the Archbishop's vision, the goals set coming out of the Senate process, and it's intended. It's kind of I describe it as a grassroots evangelization effort to cast the net wide for everyone, young, old, and I love that. And to keep us vital as a local church of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and all that, and our parishes. So, but it's a great story, Doug. Really, I appreciate you sharing that. And we're going to wrap it up here with from the Magic Hat question.
I thought I was supposed to put some money in there.
You can if you want.
It does look like a collection basket.
It is. It's an old-time collection basket, actually, from St. Victoria back in the day. But what do we got here for a
Describe the vacation you would like to take if money were no object.
And with you, money is no object, right?
Oh yes. Well, there was that time. It's always an object,
Yeah.
If you have too much, it's not enough.
Yeah.
You know how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really enjoy land travel. If money were no object, of course, now you can't do it because of world tensions and so forth. But I'd love to ride that Trans-Siberian Express all the way across.
Oh.
I think it goes, I don't know exactly where it goes,
Yeah.
but Russia and into China and all that stuff. Because I just enjoy looking out the window of a moving train. I have no idea why that's relaxing, but it is.
Well,
I enjoy it very much.
That would be an experience. But back to trains again. But Doug, thank you. I want to thank you for your service as a priest.
Well, thank you for yours. While I was out goofing around, making money and having fun, you were out saving souls. We're the same age. Actually, Bob is a year younger than I am. So.
And the joke is, among my brother priests, I use hair dye. But other than that,
Yes, I was asking to use some of that so my hair could look a little lighter.
but so with maturely, Father Doug was ordained. One of the oldest priests ever ordained for the diocese.
I don't know if Father Al Bachman was ordained 10 years before I was, and he was 62 years old.
Okay.
And I was 62 years old when I was ordained. And we're good friends, but I never have asked him if he was the oldest or I was the oldest. And I don't know for sure that we are.
Orthopedics.
But he's still kicking
You are
too.
a later vocation. I went at 18, and it's all good. We both have experienced priesthood together. I had that. We overlapped. I love that. Got to know you more recently, of course, as a priest, and that's been something I really value and treasure. But Doug, thanks for taking
thank you.
time, and I learned things about you I did not know.
No.
And I know a lot about you. But just a great story, and everybody, thanks for tuning in. It's always good to have you here. Take care. God bless.
God bless.